Now, I'll freely admit that there's been multiple times in my YouTube career where I feel like I just went too far in the wrong direction with a game review. Like, I feel that my title for Luigi's Mansion 2, for instance, sounded like the game was so bad that the game literally ended my childhood when I just wanted to convey that it was the point where I started thinking critically about games. But I can see the confusion, that was an oopsie. Or Pac-Man World Rally, where I thought I was right at the time by saying it was bad, but as the years went on, I actually started thinking it was better than I remembered. Perhaps my most infamous take, though, surrounds a dearly beloved platformer from what feels like everyone's childhood. I'm talking about none other than the 2002 sequel to Pac-Man World, the esteemed Pac-Man World 2. Well, the 2 sort of, gives away that it's a sequel. Okay, look, my general feeling on Pac-Man World 2 was that it was a good game that had some detrimental flaws, and really, I was just kind of mad that the fans of the franchise were overlooking those a bit too much. Firstly, I felt like the collectible system was way too messy for its own good. Usually in platformers, you're able to get some of the MacGuffins, which is whatever YouTuber says now for these games, on one go around and pick up the slack on the subsequent runs. I always feel like this should be the system in video games, and really nothing else. In Pac-Man World 2, though, you not only had to collect dozens of fruit in one flawlessly executed level, but up to hundreds of Pac pellets too, which in my opinion should be considered a crime to make players go for. Like, look, there are levels that are literal auto-scrollers, or where Pac-Man faces the cheese in camera like a clown, or you have to make a jump and it doesn't work. Like, I don't have to justify it, okay? It's just a stupid mechanic. Look, I don't want to repeat history here, because I do think Pac-Man World 2 has some really good moments, and I know I started this video with sort of an apologetic— oh my god, the bosses. Okay, so some of the bosses were totally fine. In fact, I would say most of them were. But the developers were just being playground bullies when you look at something like the Clyde fight. Except playground bullies steal 75 cents for lunch, the Namco devs stole my 40 bucks, so it's arguably worse. Not only is there so much trash flying at you, the hitboxes on Clyde just sometimes, don't work, which for a video game, it's kind of a problem. And the water world, oh my goodness, the water world. I'd be better off watching the actual water world or playing water world on Virtual Boy. I love levels where you just move forward with nothing to explore. I love a bargain bin version of Star Fox 64 in my platformer that stars Pac-Man, the guy who eats things. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, this game has just haunted me for years because I know everyone loves it and everyone wants me to be on that side of history. What kind of history books are writing about Pac-Man video games and video game reviewers? Look, there are things that I really do love about Pac-Man World 2, though. The animations and charm are simply unmatched, and there are a lot of levels that I found to be genuinely well designed. In fact, if we're looking at the game as a whole, I've really only disliked the lava and ocean worlds. I loved the snow levels, I loved the Bedoing Woods, and the ghost levels were so special. Sure, they all had their jank moments, but I feel like the developers had something good here. They just fucked it up at 10 other points. And so I got a lot of pushback on that video. Some of it was justified, some of it made me question my entire life decisions. But look, I wanted this game to be good. I wanted to be with all the people calling this the spiritual successor to Super Mario 64. I wanted to come on camera and tell the world that this was a masterpiece that deserved to be beloved from the rooftops. But I couldn't lie. I just couldn't bring myself to say something about a game that I didn't think was true to myself, and therefore, I found myself eating at the virtual lunch table alone for years to come. Okay, that was really fucking nerdy even for me. So fast forward 3 years, in July of 2025, in one of the ever so dreaded Nintendo partner directs, a full-fledged remake to Pac-Man World 2 would finally be announced. Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac. The Re-Pac lineage of games started shortly after my Pac-Man World 2 video, with the first game being released September of 2022. As it would seem obvious, the first game would just be Pac-Man World Re-Pac, a remake of the original Pac-Man World. Still waiting on that Pac-Man VR revival, but I'll just keep waiting, I guess. Now, I basically just gave you all a mini re-review of Pac-Man World 2. I don't think we have to do it for the original as well, but just to have some context, Pac-Man World 1 is what I consider to be the best game of the original trilogy. It was genuinely fun. It had some really special theming that I felt World 2 outright lacked because it just did the Mario worlds. There were some really solid moments, and I don't know, I don't think Pac-Man World did anything overtly special. It was just a damn good game, and the remake only improved upon it by streamlining it, giving it a fresh coat of paint, removing bosses that almost broke my hand, and removing bosses that almost broke my hand by me wanting to punch a wall. I hope Anubis Rex is burning in hell where he deserves to spend the rest of eternity.
I feel like the important question with Pac-Man World or Re-Pac, though, was would there be sequels? Would we get a World 3 Re-Pac? I was just asking about that one.
Well, they made a survey that seemed like both were a possibility, but really, if you look at it, Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac just made sense. It not only sold better than one, but again, this game is a beloved game that people cheer in the streets every day, and now that it was finally 2025, they did it. So this time around, I just hope I can see what's special about this game. I'm hoping I can walk away from my playthrough in this review joining the hype train. In fact, I'll be the conductor, seeing what they fixed and being able to say, I love, not just like, Pac-Man World 2. So let's boot up the game. Booting up the game, Pac-Man fucking talks, as do all the characters. Now, for those versed in painfully mediocre video games, this technically isn't anything new for the franchise, as Pac-Man World 3 of all games had a full voice cast. What I find to be downright poetic justice about this decision, though, is that they actually hired the same voice actor, Martin Sherman, who voiced Pac-Man in World 3, to come back and voice Pac-Man in World 2 Re-Pac. It is so awesome. I mean, just imagine being Martin Sherman, sitting around and voicing a random hero in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and then getting a call from your agent, I don't know if he has an agent, just roll with it, saying, "Hey boss, Namco wants you for Pac-Man again." And being in Xenoblade 3 has literally no relevance to this video, I just wanted to point it out. Now, this is greedy as all hell, but I would have liked it if they went a little bit farther with this and brought back the voice of the ghosts as well. But considering Pinky's voice actress has done one singular role since 2006, I can understand if that wasn't the easiest task. In fact, someone check in on her, I hope she's doing alright. Anyways, yeah, voice acting has been introduced here, or reintroduced, depending on if you accept crap. I'm a big fan of this edition, to be honest, though it does come off as sort of weird that they didn't do this for 1, but just said, like, let's just start it in 2. It almost makes you wonder if they're setting up a World 3 Re-Pac. In the meantime, we do have a story. That's all you need to know. There is a story. See, the benefit of me not having a crazy attachment to this game is I can just say it how it is. This wasn't special in the original, and it's nothing special here either. Spooky is the scary, evil ghost guy who was sealed 100 years ago by Pac Wizard and Pac Knight. He gets the golden fruits, the ghosts are working for him like con men, and it's up to Pac-Man to go across the land and grab the golden fruits back. Now, this may sound like I'm being negative, but this simple narrative is actually something I loved about the original game, and therefore, something I love about this game too. I mean, it doesn't take itself too seriously. You have a story to set up the game, and that's about it. If you don't like it, go play Final Fantasy and think about what you've done. As for the voice acting, as novel as it is, I gotta be honest, I mean, it's pretty bad and kind of cheesy, but for that, I do love it. Pac-Man just has the same cadence and wit about him that he had in World 3, and while he doesn't have any real zingers like he did in that game, it's just sort of comforting.
And see, that's my nostalgia excusing something bad about a game.
They really fleshed out this concept too. Each world starts with an introduction by someone like Pac Ranger or Pac Professor, as well as each boss fight having a little, "You're gonna go down, Pac-Man." Now, these cutscenes technically were in the original game, but they were so forgettable and just were text mashing. So this was a nice way to make that aspect of this game kind of memorable. But this is really all window dressing. Who cares? Let's drift our lookers to the actual game. Firstly, let's talk about Pac Village. Now, notably, you can't 100% this level right away. Like, why have, these giant UI graphics showing me what I cannot achieve? Jerks. But if it makes you feel better, or in this case, if it makes me feel better, I couldn't seem to 100% it anyways, or at least as far as I'm aware. The way that this works is that you play the game, and upon finishing each boss and clearing a world, more fruits will spawn in the village. You just know that the game developer who put fruits in these stupid chimney sweeps was laughing their ass off. I mean, tears streaming down their face, chuckling at the fact they hid fruits in a toxic location. But anyways, yeah, even when you get all the fruits, the completion doesn't save between sessions, or I mean, at least it didn't for me. In fact, this is sort of a subjective complaint based off of my experience and nothing else, but the Pac Village feels extremely spaghetti coated. I'm telling you, you mess around here long enough and it just becomes the Wild West of fuckery. I at one point randomly did a moon jump, the frame rate would drop to 30 after some cutscenes, and I swear at one point the music just started doubling.
It's really annoying to have something like that happening because, like, okay, you get it. I don't need to keep doing this.
At first, I thought it was just my headphones, or maybe it was OBS, which is what I use to capture my gameplay. And now you know why all my game footage looks like crap. So I went back to the Switch 2's menu and messed around with the menu sounds, and the audio is specifically doubled only in Re-Pac 2. So I just reset the game because it was annoying me. Now, outside of these quirks, which for all I know, no one else experienced, I do find the Pac Village to be a highlight of the game. More Pac citizens will join the fray as the game continues, from Pac grandmas to Pac policemen to the cast from Pac-Man World 1, also known as not Miss Pac-Man, not Pac Jr., apparently not Chomp Chomp, and who the hell is this? Was this character in the original Re-Pac? Should I know that? Probably. Anyways, the world is bustling and full of nothing but charm and life of the most pristine caliber, and on top of that, you can unlock these figures throughout the game that you can just place throughout your village on the pillars. You can either get the capsules containing them just by playing the levels, or by gambling. I mean, it's legal gambling, but gambling with gachapons, which is apparently a Bandai Namco licensed term. Oh, you guys are flexing on us.
I hope no one paid too much money for that trademark.
Small diversion. But speaking of legal hogwash, can I ask why the hell there's like 3 terms and condition pages you have to sign in order to play this game? Now, this was also in the first Re-Pac, and it may be more common than I realize in gaming since I don't play that many new games. I think Lego 2K Drive actually had something similar, but dude, this is like a platformer with a villain named Spooky. It's not that serious. It may sound like this doesn't matter, and it doesn't, but every time a game does this, I actually have to sit down as a content creator and make sure there's not some clause in there saying they're gonna sue me if I say something negative about their precious game. And you know, we really should be reading these terms and conditions anyways. What if they just put something in there that just says, we all owe Namco $10 million? Sorry, you illegally signed a contract. I mean, what's next? You have to sign a release of liability to play Ring Fit Adventure? You have to include Shigeru Miyamoto in your will if you want to play Pikmin 5? Leave this crap out of the game. Thank you and good night. Anyways, the village, it's good. I like it. You can also play some original Pac-Man games in the arcade as you progress. You only get Pac-Man, Pac-Mania, and Pac-Attack, so Miss Pac-Man is missing from the original game, but who cares?
I'm sure a lot of people.
You know, I don't know if I've talked about this in a video before, but this little arcade here just reminds me of being a kid. I'm gonna give like a little off-topic antidote, so if you want to skip ahead 30 seconds, do it at the cost of my feelings being hurt. But basically, I was at some schmuck's birthday party, and an arcade truck was present that had all sorts of arcade games. So the kids were just playing the latest and greatest shooter games. House of the Dead was there, a bunch of modern stuff, if you will. And I just sat in the corner the whole time playing on a crusty Pac-Man arcade machine. I mean, there were like cobwebs running off this thing, and I sat there for hours. Playing Pac-Man here sort of reminds me of that, you know, just like an escape within an escape. These obviously meant a lot more in the original world too, back when you couldn't just Google Pac-Man to play it, but it's still a nice addition to this day, and I'm glad even if Miss Pac-Man has been retconned to hell, they kept the other arcade games in this remake. Also in the Pac Village, there's a suspicious building you walk into if you want to change your costume. I don't get why this is an entire building. I just have to imagine you walk in and it's just one of those infinitely running racks of clothes. And last but definitely not least, there's a challenge board where hacks around the Pac Village give you challenges for the levels if you want to unlock costumes. I love this a lot actually, and some of the costumes in this game are just so funny. Like I like this pre-order bonus I got. It's just a ghost head. But we'll be talking about the actual challenges a bit more as the video goes on.
Well, so far so good. I mean, I don't love that 100%ing the village is sort of impossible and that the village is kind of glitchy. But look, I really like the Pac Village. It's nothing mind-blowing, but as a home world, it's fun. Sorry. Force of habit.
Getting into the actual game, the first world establishes key differences between Pac-Man World 2 and 2 Re-Pac almost immediately. Now, firstly, whereas Re-Pac 1 was more or less a one-to-one remake of Pac-Man World, it's very clear from the onset that Re-Pac 2 is going to take its own liberties, and this game is more of a reimagining than a dedicated remake. Now, starting with the changes, of course, the whatever the hell this thing is in the room, is the complete overhaul of the graphics. I don't like being indecisive in videos, but I must admit to you all that I'm pretty torn on this. Like, Re-Pac 2 looks great in terms of fidelity. The textures are improved and the models look really clean.
Given it's been 25 years, I would sure hope so.
You can definitely see the improvements in some of the enemies throughout the two games. In the original, these skeleton dudes look paper thin and they're already skeletons. They just look like the dry bones from Paper Mario. And if you know what the heck this thing is, you deserve a prize of some caliber. I mean, I still don't know what they are in Re-Pac 2, but you can see it clearly now. However, while I really love the graphical fidelity and general improvements to 2 Re-Pac, I will say that I don't feel like this is a perfect translation. The original World 2, quite frankly, just did have a more appealing atmosphere to it. Looking at a multitude of worlds, Re-Pac 2 is just very clear and clean, like almost sanitized. The original World 2, though, has fogs and a more diverse array of lighting. Now, I have actually seen this sort of phenomenon in other video game remakes. GTA Definitive Edition is a great example of such. GTA San Andreas on the PS2 had tons of fog and atmosphere amenities, and I guess not just the Definitive Edition, but other terrible ports like the mobile and Xbox 360 versions dug up a wind machine and got rid of all the fog, and it looks stupid.
So this is 2002. And this is 2025.
Now look, in the 2000s, this sort of visual trick stemmed from game developers getting creative to hide stuff like draw distance and ugly models. But as we've learned from this, that, and this, people will become nostalgic for quite literally anything, even fog on a virtual screen. Yeah, it's really not the same thing here. This is not an open world game, but my point is, I get why some of the atmospheric measures are dearly missed in Re-Pac 2. Everything does look cleaner, but arguably, it's just to the game's detriment. The water world is a lot more murky in the original, for instance. It feels kind of like you're swimming through something gross and obstructive with doubts about what's ahead. And also the water graphics look gross. Re-Pac 2 looks a lot better, but the water is as clear as an ocean in Hawaii. Bedouin Woods in the original feels a lot darker, like you're actually traversing through a murky forest without a clear light. In Re-Pac 2, you could wear sunglasses here. You would look stupid, but you could. And the Ghost World is the clearest example of the loss of atmosphere, as the, fog, which, most haunted mansions and haunted houses have plenty of, kind of just disappeared here. Now, I don't think this is a key issue everywhere. I mean, the lava world in both games looks a bit cheesy. Not cheesy as in lame, cheesy as in I literally feel like the lava looks like nacho cheese. Kind of like those gross explosions in Mighty Number 9.
Bottom line, does Re-Pac 2 look more like a video game and contain less realism? Yeah, but at the end of the day, a video game looks like a video game. Oh no.
Again, the sheer fidelity of it does look better, and at least for me, I prefer having an option for a version of the game that looks like this. In part, I do think this is to put it more in line with Pac-Man World Re-Pac, and as I've been alluding to, I do think this game hints towards a broader effort to make these games an established miniseries. Now look, with these sorts of changes, you can have a whole ass argument about game remakes and if they should and shouldn't change aspects of the original, and we don't fully have to get into that here. But I personally have always loved in remakes just seeing something done in a new idea with a fresh perspective. I played T2ID HD even though I played the original 5 times through as a kid, just because I liked seeing it through a new lens. Did I agree with all the changes to it? Definitely not. Why the hell is this purple toad on a deserted island? To teach me action commands 10 hours into the game? But it was just nice to live in Rogueport one more time and just see it in the modern age and revived. That's why Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl ended up being one of my least favorite games of all time. I wanted to experience Gen 4 ever since I was a kid in a breathtaking new world. At BDSP, I mean, I don't even know if I'd call this a remake. I might just call it an enhanced port. I'm rambling and exaggerating, getting off topic a bit, but what the hell else is new? I also just view this discussion as very important to the thesis of Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac, because again, this is a reimagining of a very beloved game. As such, I actually do respect them almost redoing this game in so many of its aspects, but this is partially because infamously, I never have had the same attachment to this game that so many people seem to have. My point really is, by all this mumbo jumbo, that I am more open to the changes that Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac presents than the average player, and I just think that should be noted throughout this video. All that to say, the developers really took some creative liberties with Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac, and most of the time, it's for the better. Here's something really awesome. Do you remember this like stupid power-up? And I use the term power-up extremely certainly loosely, from the original, the little pink dot that shrunk Pac-Man down.
I am sure that even this game's most ardent supporters just remember that this power-up exists.
Like, look, you get it, and then you walk through a crack in the wall. Wow. Is it kind of cool from a technical perspective? I guess. Mario 64 kind of did the same thing, 6 years ago. I really hope no game developer busted their ass to make this, because I just don't think this would even pass for like a college thesis project. But in Re-Pac 2, there are actually key moments the developers added where it's used, and for more than 5 seconds this time. Now, is it that impactful? Not really, but it takes something that was sort of a sore thumb from the original and just makes it better. And you know what they say, better is better. I don't know if that's a real quote, I just kind of wrote it. This isn't going to win the game of the year or something, but you know what? I appreciate them doing something. But looking more critically, I just know another something that's going to eternally piss off the diehard fans of this game is the fact that developers basically outright remade some of the levels here.
Now, I'm going to talk for a moment about my experiences with Pac-Man World 2, especially the levels that made me mad. Now, if you've seen my original review already, then you could just basically hear me say the exact same things I said in the first video. I'm not giving you a time code, you just got to hear me complain. Nah, just kidding. Just click.
Now, as talked about in my preamble, I really loved the first few worlds of Pac-Man World 2. I thought everything up until the lava levels were genuinely a good time. Then the lava levels were hell, and not just because of the aptly themed lava, it's because they made me want to cry myself to sleep. Like, whether or not people want to admit it yet, there was some genuinely bad design in those levels. Like this bottomless chasm where there's a jerk in the middle spitting fire at you. I mean, this just feels unfair, as there's a ridiculous amount of pushback whenever you take a hit. Or what about this slide here that had the most narrow path in the entire world at the very end of one of the hardest levels in the entire damn game? And if you tried to avoid the narrow path because you tried to be cute and cheeky about it, the game decided, let's disregard the laws of physics. In a good video game like Mario 64, Pac-Man World 2 is also a great game. Hey, it's great. Not just good, it's both of them. Both of them are good games. Anyways, you can skip the slide, yippee. Basically, developers in Mario 64 actually encouraged the player to experiment, or at a minimum, knew about it and allowed it to happen. In World 2, they just said no. Now, I wouldn't complain about the developers in World 2 limiting your options if this narrow path wasn't the width of a toothpick, because as is, that's why a player would probably try to jump off the cliff in the first place, because the level was so poorly designed that the player feels the need to cheese it. I want some Cheez-Its. Also in Magma Opus, which is, a pathetic lie of a title, there was just some really confusing level design. I won't go into the whole rant again, and various commenters and friends have told me it's a skill issue, but there was just some hallway where getting back to the main land was incredibly confusing. Now, once you know you have to rev roll off of, the bouncy pad that has an arrow pointing you in the opposite direction, it's not too bad.
Yep, it's all a skill issue. Just ignore the arrow and the entire function of that platform, and it just makes sense. I'm just stupid.
Anyways, all this to say, I'm pretty sure they just gutted the entirety of Magma Opus out and made essentially a new level. I win, you all lost.
Okay, I was gonna clap for this scene, but since I hold the mic, I can't. So how about we do some snapping? This is it's poetry.
And see, this is one of the reasons I'm going to say I really like what Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac brings to the table. Magma Opus is, to me, a symbol of where fans may split on this very remake. I'm not trying to be one of those video essayists and make something a bigger deal than it should be, but this one level represents the perplexing, ponderous elements of play and really forms the entire backbone of the debates of ethics and morals regarding video essays as a whole.
Okay, look, at least I'm not using ChatGPT, because I don't think ChatGPT would come up with something that's stupid.
But look, you have a level with multiple points of putrid, terrible level design, and here I want to speak to the hardcore fans of Pac-Man World 2. I'm not trying to be inflammatory, I'm actually asking, do you believe that if something is poorly designed and the developers want to remake the game, they should just port it over for the sake of authenticity to the original product? And to be fair, if you say yes, I disagree, but I can understand an argument for it begrudgingly. For one, something that gets talked about way too much, but is crucial to a discussion like this regardless, is the fact that nostalgia is a powerful force. I would imagine people who grew up with Magma Opus have a positive memory and recollection of it. Now, why is that? There's a lot of reasons, but if you were a kid or even a college student, you probably, for one, had a lot more free time than you do now. Is it fair to say then that you at 6 years old had more time than the average person to be okay with gaming over on the same level over and over, or spending an hour of your life figuring out with trial and error that you need to level off a bouncy pad? And look, I know whenever I talk about something like this anyways, people who are adults or don't have free time will inevitably say it was easy. I figured it out in no time, man. And they'll say I suck. And look, I do. I'm openly admitting it. I'm just saying that was my experience. And so yes, them redoing Magma Opus entirely, at least to me, massively improved the base game. Like yeah, sections of it and the essence of the stage are sort of represented, but instead of a bunch of confusing crap, there's now log rolling. The slide section is entirely redone, and unlike Magma Opus, I actually had fun. To me, and maybe just me, this is representative of how they made this game better and improved my experience of Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac. Now I'm hoping everyone can at least agree a little bit more if you look at something like the Water World's first 2 levels, right? We can all agree on this one, right? An on-rails water level where you can only move forward and have to reset immediately if you want to 100% it. This isn't good, right? Do the fans like this? Anyways, yeah, the Water World's first 2 levels are reimagined, and people went off to cheer in the streets upon finding out. Instead of straight lines, these are now just outright underwater levels with crevices to explore, and buttons, and little rooms with ghosts, and dude, these are so good. I mean, the water controls aren't great in this game to be fair, but the level design itself is just so much more enjoyable to me. It's an actual level where you play a video game. And of course, when looking at World 2, one of my least favorite aspects of that game are the bosses, as I discussed in the preamble. Specifically, the glide fight was one of the worst levels in any video game I ever played. I mean, I already ranted about this, but I'm gonna rant about it again because I don't care. Here's the thing. People roasted me for the difficulties I've had here, and as I've been saying, it probably is a skill issue. In fact, I've had direct disagreements with friends who say this level is actually tolerable. But at least for me, and only me, I found the expectations set by the developers to be completely unfair if you wanted to succeed and, you know, progress the damn game. There was so much crap flying at you at any given moment. And worst of all, the hitboxes on Clyde, didn't work. So, what did they do? What did they do for Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac? They fixed the boss. I mean, they entirely redid it. I mean, they redid every boss in the game actually, but like it's still, this is great. Now looking at the bosses, the frog boss is basically the same, which is fine because it was playable already in 2002. But then from there, the bosses are, instead of just Dr. Eggman wannabe machines, actual mechanical animals. The Bedouin Woods boss is now a giant-ass owl with some kind of ambiguous hitboxes, but like with the frog, a playable boss. Binky's polar bear boss has a skiing section before you fight her, which at first I thought was unneeded, but it's kind of like a parallel to Anubis Rex's hallway. Another example I thought of when feeling the developers want Re-Pac 2 to be in line with its predecessor. And the fight is actually really fun. I mean, you just basically dodge stuff and then play soccer back and forth with Pinky. And Clyde is just great. I mean, this fight is just metal. Literally metal. I wonder if the ghosts are trimming out on something. There's just like this giant rave going around. Just hoping there's no kiss cam in there. Now, I'm not gonna say this Clyde fight was easy. Doing this without losing a life actually took me a long amount of time, as this boss is lengthy and requires a fairly impressive run to pull it off. How this works is that there are sequential buttons around this arena. After hitting all of them, you gotta move up, bounce on the drums, and bounce down. Now, it can be annoying when Clyde turns his head at left. Okay, I'm recording a game review. Do you need something from me right now?
Sir, it's now Blinky. It's not Clyde anymore.
Huh.
Okay. Well, they fixed it. Clyde is Blinky. I mean, does this mean it's a Clyde day or a Blinky day? Now it's just confusing because we have to specify every time we talk about it. I don't know, does Namco want a prize for fixing it at this point? Good job, Namco. You did 10 seconds of research on your pivotal arcade game before making the characters for Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac. I'm so proud of you. Anyways, when Blinky turns his head when you're on the way down, it sucks, and it does feel like a cheap shot, but you can kind of predict that to happen with practice. Now, unfortunately, there was one boss they did not bother fixing, and this was the Waterworld's boss. Now, for context, please note how when I said the Waterworld was improved, I said specifically the first 2 levels. Now, I'm hoping everyone can at least agree a little bit more if you look at something like the Waterworld's first 2 levels, right? We can all agree on this one, right?
Just wanted it on the record.
Now, before we get to the boss, the 3rd water level is just an on-rails auto-scrolling shooter level. Now, I'm just gonna go on a little rant here. I really hate when a game specializing in one genre just has a few levels or missions that are in a completely different style of game. This can be done right, but when it's done poorly, it just sucks. I'm not saying a platformer needs to have the same types of levels all the time. I get it. It can be a creative way to shock the player and just do something different for the sake of being different. Like when GTA 5 makes Michael do yoga. I get it. It's cheeky. Like, ha ha ha, the player is doing yoga of all things in a GTA game. How wacky. But then you have something like Pit of Parks Episode 8 in Mario Sunshine, which, hey, Mario Sunshine doesn't do this sort of thing very well. Just stay in your dang lane. Pac-Man World 2 just thrives on being a platformer. You know, the genre it says if you look up the game, the genre that's on the eShop page. These shooting missions are just such a sharp departure from the game that these levels don't even feel like they belong. In fact, this is something you pay $1 for at Chuck E. Cheese. And so, this 3rd Waterworld level is probably my least favorite in this game. And the boss is just a slog. It takes so long, and it's so easy to take hits. In between phases, you do have an opportunity to get more health, but you have to forego your ship's power-ups to do so in a split road sort of situation. In fact, all the bosses have enemies walking around if you need some health, but 80% of the time, they only give you power pellets. Gee, that's so useful. Thank you so much. So sometimes in this game when you're dying on a boss, you'll just be grinding enemies for health, only to find out you're just wasting time, and then you take more hits in the process. But yeah, getting back on track, the water boss is so long. All the bosses in this game are long anyways because they get a second phase because of the golden fruit. The phases that these present are mostly just a little bit more difficult, never anything too crazy, but the water level's fruit extends it by so long, and not to mention there are just sections with lasers that have ambiguous hitboxes. Just in general with these underwater sections, the depth perception is pretty dang bad. You're just sort of at a weird angle, and I guess they decided that their 10-minute boss fight wasn't long enough, so they added a 3rd phase, which is the best part of the level, where you just shoot at a wall. A change that I don't know how I feel about, even as I write a long video essay talking about the game, is that the Galaxians are no longer in the levels. Well, I mean, you get the actual Galaxian collectibles in the levels, but then you have to go to a separate machine in the Pac Village to play them. And if you need a refresher, the Galaxian mazes are basically just the original Pac-Man style in different themes with some more hazards, and you get 1 per level. These are just okay in my opinion. They're more of a cute side distraction than anything else. Upon beating the Galaxian mazes, you can unlock more gambling machines. I sort of like that the Galaxians don't break up the pace and flow of the gameplay, and instead you could just focus on the level, but I do still wish that the mazes were either played at the end of said level, or the game could just give you an option to play it then. Now, I'm not going to hold this against the game because it's my fault, but I did actually forget to do these until the end of the game, and therefore I missed out on tons of gachapon figures. I can take or leave this change. I don't think it makes the game better, or I don't think it makes the game worse. It's just a change.
Well, a recession is also a change.
But you want to discuss a really pivotal change? Well, my hunch, and this is just a hunch, I think fans are going to be a little upset possibly. Theoretically, just a hunch. Because Pac-Man's moveset and physics are, completely different. This is probably one of the most contentious aspects of Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac. This plays basically nothing like the original game, like at all. Now looking back to the OG PMW 2, the controls were a different ball game. The butt bounce had a very weighty sort of feel. The way I've seen it described before is that Pac-Man is sort of like a basketball being dribbled. Now I feel the most ardent supporters of the game will disagree and get mad at me for this, but I still do believe the physics of the original weren't perfect. The rev roll, while great to build up speed and launch your pack, I always felt terrified to use if I needed to perform the move over a gap or something. It was chaos, and some people might like that uncertainty and get a thrill over it, but you could also say the same thing about drugs. But besides that, Pac-Man was a pretty simple creature. You had a kickflip that I only remember being required a few times, and that was about it. Now for a platformer of a thread of this cloth, this was good.
So is something very good, perhaps, maybe great, in a remake, you may ask, how much of that really needs to be changed? Well, I think what happened is a Namco developer played the original for maybe 5 seconds, died once, and then said, "It's all going out the window. We need to redo all of that right now."
Now, the different feel of the game is probably what I'm the most mixed on. When you get to platforms in the modern age, generally speaking, they're a lot floatier and so much more different feeling than they used to make them. So a remake being made in this style is not uncommon and isn't a surprise, but as said, Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac feels basically like an entirely different game control-wise, and I don't know if it's better or worse for it. Let's start with the changes, and from there we can have a comment war that inevitably leads to someone crying, usually me. Now, as inferred, I will say that Pac-Man is incredibly floaty. Now, obviously, when there's precision platforming, this is a massive boon to the player, but the issue is that it is such a help to the player that it makes the game a bit too easy at points. Look at this air time. I mean, this is sort of ridiculous, right? He looks like Yoshi, but if that slow descent isn't easy enough for you, the developers did add sort of a hover Pac-Man can do in the middle of the air. Now, this isn't broken, to be fair, as when doing this, you barely get any horizontal momentum. It's basically just like a little tiny band-aid that can help correct a poor jump. It doesn't help that this game feels floaty as is, but honestly, I did not mind this function, as it's very infrequent that you can actually use this to cheese a level. Now, this is going to be an interesting territory for me, where, because I didn't have a strong love for the original Pac-Man World 2, I didn't really mind this change. It just made the game a bit more palatable and easy to play, but do I think these physics are better?
Well, you see,
Okay, but one thing that's objectively goated, and yes, I'm saying it like it's objective, is that the rev rolls have a lot more stop to them than in the original product. You can pull back a lot easier, and so if you land a rev roll on a platform, you don't feel like Pac-Man is going to fly in a million different directions and zoom off at the cliff like a child who ate too much Halloween candy, what? But yeah, I think the levels that suffer the most from Pac-Man having some Ozempic pills are the levels or moments in the game that have the bounce pads. Dude, it feels so weird and just wrong to butt bounce on these pads and then float in the air for like 5 seconds. I mean, this to me is totally butchered, and I will say the original did these jumps so much better.
Okay, hopefully that meets my quota off of my list to make sure I say enough things that are better with the original game.
But speaking of the butt bounce, one of the most pivotal changes to Pac-Man's moveset is the super butt bounce. You see this little circle that loops around the spherical guy? Yeah, if you do a butt bounce again within that window, you get even more height and also have the ability to stun enemies. And also, Pac-Man's weight is so vicious that he can just break bear traps, sheer metal, with this force. But on the other hand, he's so dainty and light in the air, so figure that one out. He's just a shapeshifter or something. Now, this isn't a move that they just added in the game for the hell of it. This actually ends up being used quite a lot. To tell you the truth, I'm actually impressed with how naturally this slots into the remake. Now, to do this, they did make some cliffs artificially higher, or did the same with the boxes on balloons, and as established, they reimagined most of the game to begin with, so they probably didn't have to break their backs to include it. My point is, it's natural and it doesn't make me mad. Also, Pac-Man can now throw Pac pellets he collects throughout the levels as bombs. Now, this is actually a returning move from Pac-Man World 1. At first, I thought this move was basically a joke or sort of useless, but actually, they found quite a few places in the game where this is a logical attack you may use. Like, you can't butt bounce every enemy. Now, the kickflip largely remains the same, with the only change being they added a lot more crates floating in the air in this version of the game. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're now in every damn level. I mean, who the hell's going around town putting fruits and boxes on strings? Why do I care? So look, the controls and the movement are the biggest difference ultimately between these two games. Like a lot of changes and additions, I think the veterans will hate this, and I think the new players will like this. And no one will agree no matter how much we discuss this and weigh the pros and cons. So you know what? Let's just handshake, accept our differences, and move on.
Yeah, I think world peace might be a more realistic outcome than that.
Alright, let's talk about the collectibles. Oh boy, I'm excited to piss off fans with this one. I found the collectible system in Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac to be significantly improved. Now, unfortunately, you still have to get all the collectibles in a perfect run. As said, I really hated this in the original, and I really hate it here. I get some fans like the style of gameplay. I know games like Crash Bandicoot are famous, or infamous, depending on who you ask, me, for having the system. But for me personally, I had quite a number of moments in my playthrough where I was literally missing one fruit, and for some reason it was always a melon. And you know what? At a certain point, because of that, I usually would just, before finishing the level, look
look it up on my phone or computer and just try to figure out the fruit I'm missing because, look, it's just unfair. I'm sorry, but it just sucks to be actively hunting and spending time scavenging an entire level for fruits, then get to the end and realize you need to do it all over again because the developers hit a fruit off in some stupid area that you never think of or thought was off grounds. If you enjoy this, fine, you've won already because the game is like this. But personally, I find it to be very punishing. Or look at this situation here. At the end of the slide in Magma Opus, the developers put a chest right behind the end of the level, which my brain didn't register by the time I got to the bottom of the slide, and I just grabbed the completion token. Now yeah, I know that's technically my fault, and I would gladly accept fault for that chest, and the fruits need to unlock it alone. But why do I have to get every fruit in the entire level again, which took me like, what, 10, 15 minutes to begin with? I just will never understand this system or why people cheer it on. I understand if you like going for score or something and you want to maximize that per attempt. I mean, that's fine. But why make it so casual players like me get punished? And don't forget, there's sections in Pac-Man World 2's levels that upon passing, you just can't go back. So sometimes you're just forced to restart a level anyways. And when you have chests that need to be opened because of other fruits, you never really know where you stand in a given level in terms of completion. I mean, I guess this just made me more hyper-vigilant this time around, trying to get the damn fruits and looking at literally every crack, crevice, and corner, but I would say that hyper-vigilance just turned to paranoia at a certain point in my playthrough. I swear I'd be looking for like cracks in the walls and holes that didn't exist. However, I am happy to report that the collectible system is vastly improved by virtue of the player no longer needing to collect every single pack pellet to 100% the level. No, just me. Yeah, so I've spoken to some friends who hate this change, but you know what? I don't care. Sorry, Greg. I personally loved it because look, not only were there hundreds of pack felts per level in the original, sometimes the hitboxes in them just wouldn't cooperate. Or worst of all, if you were in an auto-scrolling level, it was extremely easy to miss the pack pellets. I would say this made the original Pac-Man World 2 longer, but in a very inflated sense. To learn more about this, look up Pac-Man World 2, and there are some other changes to the collectible system too. The tokens are still in this game, but they're no longer a scarce item. In the original, there were 189 specific tokens you could get throughout the adventure to unlock the arcade machines. Now, I will say I will give this point to the original game. Firstly, the tokens never abided by the rule that you had to 100% the entire level to keep them, which made the tokens feel less like a punishing collectible and more like an actual reward. You could acquire these not only by finding them in the levels, but also by 100%ing a level or doing its time trial well. Now, in 2 Re-Pac, the tokens are basically no longer a finite collectible. You get them in every level, and you could even grind them if you really want to, and these are purely used to unlock the gachapon figures. To get the arcade machines this time around, you literally just progress in the game, which makes them feel much less rewarding to get. As I talked about earlier and also in my first review, in the original game, because these were arcade games and therefore endlessly replayable, it encouraged the players to keep booting up the game and grinding these out, and in my view, really extended the lifespan of Pac-Man World 2, because it might be all you have until your next birthday or Christmas. The original just did this better. But look guys, there was a certain point with Re-Pac 2 where after 100%ing the first few levels, maybe it was just because it was easier, maybe because the game was less jank and more sanitized, that I was having more fun with Pac-Man World 2 than I ever really had in my entire life. I never 100%ed the original Pac-Man World 2. I wanted to. I love collectibles and I love 100%ing games, but look, I wasn't a kid when I finished the original for the review, even if I looked like one, and I'm not a kid now. Thank God for this beard. I just don't have time to spend hours on each level, trying again and again to find the one pack pellet I missed, so just removing that alone was huge, and as I played the first few worlds, guys, I have to say it, I started to understand Pac-Man World 2. I started focusing on the missions, which would give each level 3 different objectives, one of which was collectibles, one of which would be getting a bronze score in the time trials, and the other would be a varied task, like defeating all the enemies or breaking all the boxes or bear traps. I don't know, these were just fun, even if I did have to replay a level once or twice or thrice to achieve them. I started getting addicted to the time trials, playing the levels over and over again, not just for bronze, not just for silver, but for the freaking gold. Basically just to beat the level as fast as you can, and you can pick up floating clocks to lower your score. Look, I get
get it overall if you don't like the changes here. I feel like the physics can be considered worse. Pac-Man has way too many moves for his own good. The token system is way worse, but the game becoming easier and more simple to complete just made me get this game. I started to understand it. I started to feel like this game was better than I remembered. And then it wasn't.
Wow, those water levels were actually surprisingly improved. I guess it's time to play that third level now. I mean, hopefully they don't bring back that... Oh.
Okay, well, the missions for this one include defeating all of the enemies.
Now this shouldn't be too hard. Oh.
I can't even clear the first section. These enemies go by way too fast. I don't understand how a human being is meant to achieve this. I am literally unable to even clear all of the enemies on this very section. There are upgrades, but the homing missiles take way too long to fire, which basically makes it impossible to clear the enemies when they zippity-doo-dah past you immediately. Like, seriously, I actually spent hours on this to absolutely no avail. And it made me mad because I really wanted to 100% this game for this review, and now it's all in jeopardy.
This is a massive issue because even if I have been 100%ing the entire game up until this point, if I can't 100% this one level, it's all in vain. I'll never have all the funny and charming costumes the developers put in the game for succeeding, and I'll never have a perfect score on the menu. There just has to be something I'm doing wrong here. You know what? Let me look it up.
What in the name of the Pac Devil himself? So upon doing some research, not only is this level incredibly hard, but at least at this time, you cannot use the checkpoints to clear this objective. So even if I cleared all the enemies on that section and got to the next with a checkpoint, it wouldn't save the run if I messed up the third section. From what I understand, the game has a bug where if you don't see the score pop up, it doesn't count as defeating the enemy. What this amounts to is restarting from the beginning of the level each and every time, and mind you, I can't even get to one checkpoint, period.
That was my experience upon discovering the third water level.
Look, yeah, I get it. This is one level in the main game, but it killed my vibe. I'm not saying the game is bad. I still think this is a great game, but I no longer cared about golding future levels because if there's one that I couldn't finish, what's the point? Who cares about 98%? It's not like you can go to a bar and brag about it. The bartenders and patrons only accept 99% or higher, and even the next level having an on-rails timed shooting section for the boss's time trial. I just started losing it. I really did love Pac-Man World 2 for the first time in my life, and I was just so disappointed by this completely poorly coded objective that this alone just made me feel kind of deflated. And yes, this is one of those things that's absolutely doable if you sit down and have the time to practice and get good. But as I've gotten older and busier with a full-time job, making these videos wasn't as easy as it once was for me. Spending the days and possibly weeks perfecting these things can delay the video for even longer. I mean, look, I'm already getting this out, what, 2 months after the game released already, when nobody gives a shit? So I'm not gonna call this an impossible task, but when I'm on a timer, both figuratively and literally, something like this becomes untenable for my playthrough. Now, thankfully, everything from here was pretty good. The Ghost World, like in the original, was truly a highlight of the game. The literally on rails level, while it might be a lot easier, felt pretty solid, and the penultimate level of the game, being a giant maze, is just always a favorite of mine. Even if I think the atmosphere was butchered in the remake, this being a giant marathon with tons of enemies and a combination of tons of mechanics introduced throughout the game makes it an all-time classic. I do hate these stupid, veiny tentacles that pop out of the ground and slap you though. But all in all, the Ghost World is great.
So yeah, I know I just had a big emotional breakdown over a stupid requirement and a stupid level, but look, almost everything else in Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac was great, and I seriously had a good time, warts and all. Okay, warts and some. But let's move on to Spooky and do this one last time.
Now, I have to admit, I was pretty scared of this boss fight. In fact, particularly nervous may be the appropriate phrasing to use. Why? Well, I peruse the news from time to time, and before World 2 Re-Pac launch, I read a Nintendo Life article where, firstly, the writer just comes off like they just want to play Silk Song. After playing those water levels, I wish I was playing Silk Song 2, or literally any other game. I mean, this reviewer was pissed. I quote, actually, Sten Sten quotes.
I don't know what I was doing wrong. After 30 attempts, dying every time, having to go through the 3 stages of the boss fight over and over again, losing all my lives, suffering 8 game overs, switching in desperation to the kid-friendly fairy mode that makes you invincible, and somehow still failing to succeed, I was thrown back to the very start once again. I just had to stop. Honestly, maybe it's just time to go back to Silksong.
I forgot to talk about the easy mode, didn't I?
Yeah, there's a fairy mode. It makes the game easier. You can't take hits. It makes time trials impossible to gold. Anyways, yeah, firstly, I want to say that I'm not judging this reviewer. And I will say I've had my moments of complete exasperation at a boss or level many times over the years. But that being said, this fight was the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, okay, don't get me wrong, it's not that easy. It did take me like 25 minutes to get it down. Firstly, there's 3 phases, and starting over at the beginning every time upon dying once can be a little aggravating for sure. But the patterns were generally easy to study, and once I got some reps in, I was done. And isn't Silksong like a super hard game? So like, I'm not trying to bully this Nintendo Life reviewer. I'm just saying that like, wait, what? There's a post game.
Oh, he wasn't talking about that spooky fight, was he?
Yeah, so this game just never ends. Holy crap. There's actually a large amount of content that opens up in the post-game. Each world gets 1 level and 1 remixed boss. It may seem a bit lame that it's only 1 level, but actually these levels are pretty long. World 1, for instance, or sorry, World 7 as the hit people call it, combines multiple. Basically what happened here is not Pac Jr. and Pac Sis get swallowed up by a portal from the giant tree.
You know what? I don't care anymore.
Basically, if you remember those old ancient cutscenes with Pac-Man and Pac-Knight and the Wizard, this is just that era. And for some reason, everything in those days just seemed to resemble the modern Pac World, but with more poison. But the most poisonous part of this entire mode, and wait for it, I'm really proud of this line, is the sheer toxicity that the game developers showed the player at points.
I'm not funny.
Now look, firstly, before I criticize anything, I do actually want to praise the developers for this post-game simply existing. It reminds me of Super Mario 3D Land's post-game, which really was just half of the game, where it took the existing levels, added some extra shit, and bam, HowLongToBeat.com participants freaked out. This sort of thing is a total win-win for multiple reasons. Firstly, it just provides the player with a lot more content, whereas the game still would have been justified content-wise at the first final boss. Secondly, it probably isn't too taxing on the developers to create, since they could just reuse all of the assets. And thirdly, if a game is too easy the first time around, this is a good way to add some challenge for the masochists out there. And so I'll say, I really like the levels. Thunder Snow Mountain is a great example. It took an already complete skiing level and made it genuinely difficult by adding the Vermilion gym hazards. These levels are challenging, but mostly fair. I say mostly because some game designer thought hiding these fruits under a damn rock was actually a fair prank to pull in the players. Literally, if you go to 7.1's 100% guide, all the comments are just complaining about that. Though with the levels as a whole, I will say something just feels off about them. Like, you can kind of tell this whole mode was developed for super cheap. I feel like the main aspect contributing to this is like in the bosses, right? There's 0 voice acting in some of those cutscenes. Not that the boss remixes needed the cutscenes, it just feels jarring, especially since the first remix boss had voice dialogue. You can tell this is the moment in time that they finished eating the crumbs of their ham sandwich budget. There's also just some really jank objectives here. Now this was actually an issue with the whole game, to be fair, and I'm all about fairness. These bad objectives were far and few between, but sometimes an objective just wouldn't make sense. Now we already talked about the hellish underwater enemy section, but for another instance, Into the Volcano has an objective where they don't want you to grab onto cliffs. This would make the level seem impossible because you would assume that means Pac-Man can't use his grubby hands to ledge grab anywhere. But it's only referring to these like falling stalagmite sort of cliffs and not just, you know, cliffs, period. Glad that me coming up with speedrunning tricks was basically a waste of my hour of my life. Or how about this situation? In the deadly poisonous meadows, they want you to destroy all of the bear traps, something you actually had to do earlier in the game too, where then I had no problem with it. Here, I completed the level after realizing that objective, and I just assumed, okay, I might have missed that one. So I went around again, doing the super butt bounce thingamabob, and it still didn't clear. So I just looked it up at this point, and people online say you can't do it. So I just started throwing Pac pellet bombs at them, and I still failed it a few times, but eventually it just worked. No clue why, no clue how, but I played this level like 5 times, maybe 6. But generally speaking, I like the levels. I really do like the levels.
Why do I keep saying I like the levels? Well, in this instance, it would imply that I dislike another part of this romp, and that's because I do, because the bosses are complete baloney trash, freaking swamp water filth that made me want to punch a wall. But I kept my cool. Like, okay, the first few are fine. The frog robot boss is actually improved since it's actually challenging instead of being Paxis's first Pac-Man boss. The owl, also more difficult, but largely just faster. The issue with the enemies not giving you health ever remains a problem for sure now that the difficulty is actually increasing, because the bosses don't save your progress between checkpoints and you get no health refills. But these first two bosses, I could live with. Now the Pinky fights against the Coca-Cola bear is trash. Not because of the fight, the fight's basically the same, but the pre-boss level is just an avalanche of crap. Now one problem I didn't really mention is that I do think the physics on the ice skating levels can be a bit off. So if literally anything gets in your way, you may as well just reset, as you're not rebuilding that momentum. And this section is so long too. All that being said, it's annoying, but this is still what I would consider passable. But Clyde or Blinky or whoever, I don't really care. This fight is downright damn annoying. It's just within the realm of being fair that I don't want to call this a scam or anything, because it's learnable, it takes time and patience, but I feel like if I can eventually do it, anyone can. But it still doesn't change the fact that this is as hard as a metal power pellet. And you know what? It almost reminds me of the Anubis Rex fight a bit. I mean, I wouldn't say it's that BS, because that was just straight up unfair. But yeah, if you're gonna do Collide 2.0, just know it's one of those boss fights that you'll need to practice a bit. But you know what? It's within your control. The remixed whale fight, on the other hand, I think might actually be impossible. I'm sure it's not. I'm sure someone's out there saying their 3-year-old beat it before kindergarten, and you know what? That's great. I hope the teacher gives them a gold star sticker. But here, I gave up because of how many times I failed, and I was basically bullied into using fairy mode by the game. Like, tell me, please, if you've beaten this, how the heck you're supposed to get this with only taking 4 hits, with the boss fight having multiple phases, especially when there's moments like this. I mean, look at these lasers. Look at how much screen real estate that takes up. Not only do you have nowhere to go, you really don't have time to prepare for it either. Even with the fairy mode at 2 times speed, look at how many hits I'm taking. I'm trying, even with unlimited HP, not to take hits just for demonstration, and I'm still taking dozens. So the fact you only get 4 mistakes for what's probably a 10-minute fight is sheer insanity. Now, could this theoretically be done and practiced the same way that Clyde's remix was? Sure, but you would need an astronomical amount of both time and patience. But you know what? At least it's within your control. The spooky fight, on the other hand, is... This fight sucks. I would like to write the Nintendo Life reviewer a formal apology and verbal statement to say I am sorry I even judged you for a second, because if this is the spooky you were writing about, I really can understand your pain on a deep emotional level. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if most people just stopped playing the game here and didn't even bother finishing it. There is so much shit happening here. And the worst part is, unlike the previous bosses, I actually don't think this could become a learned skill. There's platforms on fire, there's electricity coming down all at once, giving Pac-Man nowhere to be safe at times. There are enemies walking around, and the amount of time you have to get 6 hits in is basically the equivalent of a Kaizo challenge. If stuff like the thunder and fire was sort of in a pattern and Pac-Man consistently had somewhere to be, this could be learned. But as is, I think it's just straight up RNG, so you kind of just need luck on top of being godly at the game. And this is just phase 1 of 3. I mean, even if you beat this, you still need to get 2 more phases down, and again, you don't get checkpoints, nothing. What a cruel, uncaring, and unloving excuse of a game. Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac offers you nothing. I mean, it just basically wants you to fail here. I wouldn't be surprised if someone literally ends up crying over this game. I could not get past the first phase without fairy mode. I'm not gonna go into a whole rant in a circle again about this game's brutal difficulty. I mean, I think I've said enough why this sort of game design is detrimental to this game, whether that be via the discussion of the original Clyde fight or the poor objectives that prevented me from getting 100%. But this really was the final straw for me. Playing in fairy mode, I just turned my brain off and mentally stopped playing at all. It doesn't feel good to beat a game in this mode, and I got no satisfaction out of it.
And when that day comes, there'll be hell to pay!
So hell is confirmed to exist in the Pac-Man universe, and if heaven and hell exist, then therefore the Pac Devil is confirmed. Anyways, this game being brutal and having an unfun and miserable ending really took the wind out of the post-game boss, because Talkman is in this game for some reason and I just couldn't care. I tried for 5 minutes before just giving up because I just wanted the game to be done after my frustrating time. I usually feel bad for using easy mode in games, but here, no guilt at all, because my logic genuinely became that if this game's not going to be fair, I'm not sure why I should play fair either. I just don't get why they made the bosses in this post-game so hard. I don't think it's even just me. I mean, look at these comments comparing them to Dark Souls bosses. And yes, I suck at games, but also, Pac-Man is a kid's game. After cheating to win, we then learned that the whole reason Talkman was never invited to Pac-Man Party in World 1 is because he wiped his ass with Pac-Man's invite to the party. I'm not even joking. I'm not trying to be funny. Like, this is actually, it's actually part of the, why did they retcon World 1 this way? What the fuck, dude? Anyways, look, is Pac-Man World 2 better than I remembered? And do I like it more than the original? Oh, you actually wanted me to answer that? I know it's such a lame, indecisive, cop-out answer for a video essay, and I'm sorry if you made it all the way through and are gonna be disappointed by me being kind of wishy-washy, but I don't know which one of the two versions of this game are better, and I've thought about this for what feels like hours at this point. Like, the original has a more cozy, homemade feel, whereas the remake has more content, and some aspects have genuinely been improved, but because the post-game is brutal and unfun due to its sheer difficulty, I can't say that outweighs the anger I had towards the original. And arguably my biggest issue with the original, being a skill issue containing the stages that made me mad, are nowhere near as infuriating as the post-game in Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac made me feel. Like, Clyde sucked, but I played it enough and beat it. And yeah, I got lost in Magma Opus, but with some trial and error and Google, I made it out. Some of the bosses, some of the objectives, and some of the stuff that they messed up here, arguably it just makes the original a better experience. Like, I guess if you just end World 2 Re-Pac before the post-game or only do a few of the levels, yeah, this game is pretty damn good and probably better, as the only levels up until that point I actually hated up until then were the stupid water shooting missions. But like, I just can't count choosing to stop at an arbitrary point at the game a fair way to rank it, and it'll always suck not truly seeking out all of this game's content. And of course, as I spoke about earlier, the graphics in the original game had more of a distinct style, and I really think it should be remembered that you can get Pac-Man World 2 for dirt cheap, assuming you're one of the 155 million people who own a PS2. The Xbox and GameCube versions aren't that far off behind. And I'm so torn because World 2 Re-Pac is $30, which, to be completely fair, is a bargain. And also, to be fair, it's very likely that we'll see this game go on sale frequently as the first Re-Pac did, and it's getting DLC, which as of writing, it's not out yet. If it comes out while I'm editing, it's gonna go right here in 3, 2, 1. Okay, hello. The DLC did in fact release, and I'm doing this as sort of an improvised pickup for two reasons. One, I am very late to getting this video out considering it's a new game review, but secondly, I don't really have that much to say about it. So the Sonic and Pac-Man DLC comes with a few goodies. There's 2 levels, 1 boss, and there's also a costume that you can get, which at first I thought looked stupid, but you can kind of spin dash with it and it looks kind of cool. As for the levels, I'm not super impressed by them, I guess. For one, I don't feel like Pac-Man really moves fast enough to make Sonic-ish levels justifiable, if I'm being honest with you. Like, he moves so slow. First of all, though, the first level is just like a Generations ripoff, which maybe would be charming if Sega hasn't done that, 100 times by now. The second level is a little bit more Pac-Man-y with some rails, and there's a really good song that plays during it. As for the boss, I don't have anything to say about it because I've already done this rant 2 times about the boss that's really hard and takes me so long to beat that I just have to use fairy mode, and I don't think we need to go through that again. I think the most awkward part about why I don't like this DLC is just there's no voice acting, just like the post game, and it's just really weird because it's like, why are Pac-Man and Sonic teaming up and going to defeat Dr. Eggman? Like, this feels like probably one of the best fan mods I've ever played. It's cute and there are charming things, like the enemies are all from Sonic, or the ghosts are themed, and there's rings instead of Pac-Man health. It kind of reminds me of like Mario 64 and Sonic Generations. It's just like this weird, slow character, and it's just kind of a gimmick. Okay, look. Pac pellet bomb to my head, I will begrudgingly say World 2 Re-Pac is better, but just barely, and I think it comes down to preference. Because petty grievances aside, I really liked World 2 Re-Pac.
it does a lot right and does some stuff wrong, but with the wrong stuff being unforgivable. I want to tell you to just buy the original game, but in this instance, in this one specific instance, I do want to say buying the remake, if you are at all interested, is a worthwhile purchase. Not just because 95% of the game is fun and this is still a good game, but because, can we take a moment to point out that we have a really full-made game with new voice acting, reimagined levels, and a decent amount of replayability for only $30 when Namco could have easily made this a $60 game in today's wretched gaming economy? To me, I just feel bad about telling you not to support this product, because deals like that don't come around every day. And I want this game to be supported because even though it's flawed, I want the developers to continue making these sorts of games, and the effort they put in deserves to be rewarded, because this is not just a half-assed project. This is something that does have love and care put into it, and I know nowadays, like, studios getting shut down even if they make successful games. I really want this team to continue, even if they need to work a little bit harder the next time. I love the World games ultimately, and I really think this needs to be the future of Pac-Man. That being said, if the flaws or changes are too much to swallow, this game will inevitably go on sale one day, and I think holding off and playing the original is just as valid.
Well, if you watched it all the way through or just clicked on this time code, I'd like to say thank you so much for watching this video, as always. I'm taking this sort of conclusion as like sort of an announcement sort of thing where videos are getting really tough for me to make. I don't see myself quitting or throwing in the towel completely, but I do want to say that I think video uploads are becoming a lot more harder for me to do, and they're just taking more and more time, especially to get a video like this out. You know, when I was in college, this is all I did was work on videos. There were times I was doing 14 days a week. There were times that I was doing 14 hours in a day, and so I'd like to say I'm sorry for the past year just not getting that many videos out, and I'd like to also apologize in advance that I do think 2026 and beyond might kind of be the same way. Like, it might just be the new normal for this channel. I get 3 or 4 really good videos out a year. I still have the passion. The passion is absolutely there. So in 2026 and beyond, nothing's really changing. This isn't really an announcement. It's more so my apology, because I used to do monthly videos, and I know that's kind of what this channel was built upon. Next video is Xenoblade Chronicles related, so that might take a little bit of time, but I just wanted to say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays and have a Happy New Year. Thank you for your patience as all. You guys are great. Except for him. He's not.